Let's graph some more sine and cosine functions. This time we'll practice using amplitude, phase shift, and vertical stretches, or vertical translations, all in one problem. For example, let's sketch the function y is equal to negative 2 sine x minus pi halves plus 1. Notice it's in the form of a sine x minus b plus c. Or we could graph a cosine function as well. So we have to figure out how we are going to attack this problem. How are we going to sketch this? Remember, during your exams you will not be able to use a calculator or a graphing calculator, so you have to be able to do this by hand. Well, there's some steps that we need to take. And here's what we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to sketch the function sine x. Okay, that's our base function. Next, we're going to determine the phase shift. Remember, that means the horizontal shift or horizontal translation. So we're going to sketch sine x minus pi halves next. That's going to be a horizontal shift to the right pi halves units. Then we'll determine the amplitude. Remember, the amplitude is the absolute value of the number out here. The amplitude's 2. So we're going to stretch this a factor of 2, and we're actually going to flip it because it's negative. And then finally, we'll do the vertical translation last. And this is a very important. This is always going to be the last thing we do. We'll always do the vertical shift last. So let's see if we can do this problem. All right. Number 1. Let's graph sine x, and I've already done it for you. Remember, these are increments of pi halves here. So there's sine x. That's kind of our starting point. Step 2, we're going to do the phase shift next. So we're going to go inside and take a look. This means we have to shift it to the right pi halves units. So let's take our function here, and we'll shift it to the right pi halves units. All right, so there is y equals sine of x minus pi halves. So we've completed step 2. We've now graphed this function. All right, now, remember what the number out in front means. That means we're going to multiply every corresponding y value by a negative 2. And this is going to stretch our function, and it's going to flip it. So let's see if we can do that. So we want to take all the corresponding y values, and we're going to multiply them by a negative 2. All right, so I'll graph it down here on this new axis. All right, let's take this point here. We'll multiply the y value by negative 2, and that's just going to remain the same. Here's a point here. This is at pi, positive 1. Maybe I'll write that coordinate here. So pi positive 1, when I multiply the y value by negative 2, we're going to get the point pi negative 2. So that's the game I'm going to play here. Every y value I'm going to multiply by a minus 2. Here's the point pi halves and 0. Well, pi halves and 0 is going to stay pi halves and 0 because 0 times negative 2 is 0. Here's the point 0, negative 1. So when I multiply this y value by a negative 2, I'm going to get the point 0, positive 2. Okay, and I'll just keep going. This point here will still remain at 0. This point here is pi and 1. So that point's going to go to pi negative 2 because I have to multiply the y value by negative 2. We'll keep going. This point here, that's going to be 3 pi halves and 0, so that's going to remain the same. Here's the point 2 pi negative 1. So that point's going to go to 2 pi positive 2. And this point over here will remain at 0. And now I can sketch. And notice what it really did was it just stretched our previous graph. Okay? It stretched it, and it flipped it over. Okay, so there's the graph. That was number 3 of y equals negative 2 sine x minus pi halves. All right, so let's go through and see what we've done so far. First, we graph sine. Okay. Next thing we do is we shift it to the right, pi halves. That's where we got the red graph. Then I multiply out all the corresponding y values by a negative 2. I got our flip. Okay. So now the last thing we have to do is simply shift it up 1 unit, and we're done. Okay. So everywhere I see a dot, I'm going to just shift that dot up 1 unit. So this point will go here, this point will go here, etc. So I'm just taking my y values, I'm shifting them up 1. The vertical is always pretty easy. And there it is. And we're done. There's the graph, y equal negative 2. That's the stretch. There's the horizontal shift. And there's the vertical translation. Okay? So the only thing we really have to remember is, what does everything mean? The inside, when we're going inside the sign, that's a horizontal. The number out in front, that does a stretch. And then the number that we tack on does a vertical translation. So you might want to practice this a couple times. Make sure you get the hang of it.